Hey, ladies and gentlemen, Terry Martin, joined by Jeff Berkowitz, and Jeff and I are going to take a look at the policies and showmanship of both the Democratic National Convention and the Republican Convention, and talk about some of the issues we'll be looking at in the fall campaign. And Jeff, if you were closely looking there, you saw that that was the fireworks at the end of the president's acceptance speech from the White House, and he actually had Trump 2020 in the fireworks. Now, to me, that's showmanship. And say what you will about his policy, the man knows how to put on a show. And then the question is, how long will that give him the bump he needs coming out of the Republican convention, and to what extent will that carry us forward into the fall campaign?
Look, the stage crafting of this convention was way better than the Democratic convention. The backdrop of the White House, the backdrop of Fort McHenry in Baltimore, much more live than tape. The Democrats couldn't compare, and they caught up. The Republicans have caught up now with using individuals, regular people, as they say, plain-spoken people, blacks and women and loggers and steelworkers. So it didn't look as phony as it had in years past. It almost looked authentic, that this is the Republican Party.
Almost looked authentic.
Almost.
You know, the thing is, and I don't know how they determine who goes first versus the conventions. I think it really helped the Republicans that they were second. Number one, they get the last word, and they also could look at what the Democrats did and look at how that was presented, what didn't work, and I think the Republicans really did a masterful job of staging their convention, which in both cases, because of the COVID shutdown, these were entirely different conventions than what we've ever had in the past. You know, I was in the Cleveland Hall 4 years ago when Trump gave his acceptance speech, and he's talking to something like 20,000 people. When Joe Biden gave his speech, when Kamala Harris gave her speech, they were in a studio setting, and the Republicans, in both cases for the vice president's speech and the president, arranged to have a live audience. And Jeff, I think it just, among other things, the Republicans did right for their convention, really gave an energy to the setting of the speech.
Well, two things. They had the advantage of having the White House. There's nothing like the White House and Fort McHenry. They had the advantage of the federal buildings. Now, their critics will say this was an abuse. Some would say a violation of the Hatch Act, whatever. There ain't going to be a prosecution there. They can say what they want. Advantage coming out of the conventions, advantage Republicans. 1-0, 2-0. If there was going to be a bounce from the Democrats, it's going to be submerged by the bounce of the Republicans. So within a week or two, you're going to see a narrowing in the battleground states of the margin by which Biden is leading. It may even go to, zero advantage or zero points ahead for Biden. The other thing is look, you usually, if the things are not going well, the conventional wisdom says the president will get the blame. So they don't want the Democrats following that conventional wisdom. They don't want to make this about issues. They don't want to make this a choice. They want to just say it's a referendum on Trump. Things are going poorly. Blame him. So don't discuss the issues, and they didn't discuss issues. They didn't take positions. It all was Trump is hateful. We're not Trump. Vote for Biden.
Yeah, Orange right? Man bad, I think, was the theme of the Democratic convention. Let's listen to talking about showmanship and how the different presentations were presented to the American people. Let's take a look for a moment at just a portion of Kamala Harris's acceptance speech for vice president, and we'll follow it with shortly after with the vice president's acceptance.
This virus touches us all. We got to be honest. It is not an equal opportunity offender. Black, Latino, and Indigenous people are suffering and dying disproportionately. And this is not a coincidence. It is the effect of structural racism.
And Jeff, you know, that's, we saw a couple of things there. One, we saw what I think was a very poorly delivered speech by Kamala Harris. She just had no energy. She was flat. She's also in this studio setting, which we'll see contrasted sharply with how the Republicans presented that. And then the little clip we saw there where a lot of people were saying, the Democrats, it was just a negative downer. And they're talking about systemic racism. They're talking about the economy being bad. They didn't give us any kind of a vision for the future. And the one thing that they were heavily criticized for is they didn't talk about what was going on in the streets, all this rioting, the burning, the shootings, etc. Let's take a look really quickly now at what the Vice President did at Fort McHenry, how it was staged, and how he addressed that very issue.
Last week, Joe Biden didn't say one word about the violence and chaos engulfing cities across this country. So let me be clear. The violence must stop, whether in Minneapolis, Portland, or Kenosha. Too many heroes have died defending our freedom to see Americans strike each other down. We will have law and order on the streets of this country for every American of every race and creed and color.
And we saw right at the end there, the audience stood up. You could hear the applause, and that's the kind of thing that adds an energy both to the speaker and to the presentation. I am often critical of the way the Vice President delivers his speeches, and he gets into that cadence of delivering a message, and I find it, frankly, very annoying. But when you look at the flatness, in my estimation, of how Kamala Harris gave her speech in that studio setting, the showmanship part certainly goes again to the Republicans, and they had that, Jeff, at Fort McHenry in Baltimore, the site of the bombardment by the British that led to the Star-Spangled Banner.
You're going to be seeing this throughout our discussion today, and you're going to be seeing this throughout the presidential race. And by this, I mean, Trump is known as a disruptor. That is both his strength and his weakness, okay? And strength in the sense that a lot of people want that. Obviously, that's why he was elected in 2016. The populace was looking for somebody quite different. They were looking for that with Obama and change. They didn't think they got it, many. So actually, you had many voters for Obama, oddly, some would say, end up switching and voting for Trump over Clinton. But disruptor, that's the key word. Trump is a disruptor. Some say that is reckless, that is risk-taking, and that might be his weakness, okay? And then on the other hand, you see the Democrats afraid to mention the safety issue, okay? They're afraid to mention law and order because they are progressives. Their wing of the controlling wing of the Democratic Party is the progressive wing, and they are the protesters. And we would say, okay, they may not be the violent people there, but those violent folks are somehow a part of the protest. And they feel, the Democratic politicians feel, if they raise that issue, if they go after the violence in those protests, that'll sound like they're going after the protesters. They wouldn't try it. Now what we're hearing is that Democrats have seen the polling is turning against them on that safety issue, especially in the suburbs. That's why we're taping this on August 28th, and we're hearing in the last few days that the Democrats have been hearing the polling numbers are going against them. That's why Biden, yesterday, I guess, or day before, said, hey, look, we're for protests, but we're not for violence. So the key thing is this presidential election is set up as Trump is a disruptor, and who is going to be dealing with violence, and can the Democrats talk about that? We'll go more on that in the show, but those are the two key words here: disruptor, violence, in the streets, safety in the suburbs.
You know, there's so many things going on. Over the years, as everyone knows, the Democrats have counted on the black vote. And also they have picked up the women's vote, and you see the impact of that, and you see it in the Illinois suburbs, where DuPage was reliably Republican over the years, DuPage County, and yet we've seen in the northern part of Illinois, 2 congressional races in Illinois that last time went from Republicans to Democrats, and that's both in the 14th district and where Miss Underwood is, and in the 6th district with now Sean Casten. Those are both freshman Congress people, and in large part because there was a lot of anger felt by the voters 2 years ago against Donald Trump. Now, the Republicans have gone way out of their way in this convention, and I think pretty effectively, to reach out for both the black vote and the women's vote. And I think, you know, they're paying attention to that. One of the most effective moments, I think, was the presentation during the Republican convention. And to our viewers, the Republican convention, as we tape this, just ended last night. But one was Alice Johnson, who the president pardoned from prison after she had been sentenced to life in prison plus 25 years. It was, frankly, one of the more emotional high points of the evening, and very touching. Let's listen to just a brief part.
People, I hollered, hallelujah! My faith in justice and mercy was rewarded. Imagine getting to hug your loved ones again, and to think this first step meant so much to so many. I can't wait, because we're just getting started.
And Jeff, again, she spoke for somewhere along 6 minutes or so, but it was just one of the areas where the Republicans were reaching out, both for the women's vote and the black vote. They had another night where all the women that work within the administration or have worked, Kellyanne Conway, the White House press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, among others, were speaking about how Donald Trump supported them. So I think they did a pretty effective job in reaching out to both those groups. Let me just give you one more, and then I'm going to get your response. They had quite a number of black men speaking. Let's listen to just one of those clips.
Our president has made incredible strides to end mass incarceration and give unprecedented opportunities for black in America to rise.
Mobs torch our cities while popular members of Congress promotes the same socialism that my father fought against in World War II. We have a Democratic candidate for president who says that I'm not black if I don't vote for him.
And Jeff, so it wasn't just that they were speaking as a black woman or a black man, they were also bringing up the issues. And they were bringing up the fact that the president had the First Step program, that he has been addressing prison reform. So these, again, some of the issues that we'll have to see to what extent do they resonate with the voters. And I'm going to be looking particularly at the November vote. To what extent does Black America vote for Donald Trump? Did it go up at all? Because I think this president has made quite an outreach to the black community over the last 4 years. We'll see if it has any impact.
Well, he has been working on this a long time, and a lot of it behind the scenes. So a lot of what we see in those clips, and you have that up, people can see it on youtube.com/Illinois Channel TV, because you have 3 black men speaking, I think in about 11 minutes, and I think they all end their 3 or 4 minutes with a thank you to Donald Trump and an explanation as to what Donald Trump did that affected their life dramatically in a positive way. That is not something you can do 2 or 3 days before the convention. So you have to be working on that, and he has. Now, people can say what they want and say what he was doing in 1973, but the voters are looking at this convention, and they are deciding based on stagecraft and pacing and message, do they think that this guy, Donald Trump, who they're hearing from Democrats is an out and out racist, okay? Do they think that's true? Because if it isn't, not only does it help Trump that he's not a racist, but it hurts the credibility of the Democrats on a whole range of issues. So this black issue is way more important than I'm saying than just and that's important, can he move up the black vote, which I think was something like 8% in the 2016 election, and I think he's now getting something like a polling approval among blacks of something like 14%. But you take that further, there are a lot of suburban women watching last night, and white women mostly in the suburbs, but other whites as well. And you guess what? The whites, and this has been made by Charles Lipson and others, whites do not want to elect a racist president. And that's a remarkable plus in America's, if you're assessing America. And if these white folks in the suburbs, women and men, see and understand that Trump is not a racist, they're going to be more persuaded, especially the suburban women, to come back to the Republican Party. White men will. In 2016, I believe, in 2012, I think Obama was getting something like 37% of the white vote. That is a very small number, if I'm right. And he's obviously doing extremely well in the 95% range with blacks, which is a much smaller part of the population. But the short of it is you never really hear much about the Democrats' white problem, but you hear about the Republicans' black problem. So in this case, maybe the Republicans are ahead in addressing their problem as opposed to the Democrats addressing their gap. Okay, so that you're right. The black portrayal, those vignettes that you saw in the Republican convention, especially last night, but throughout, are extremely important to this race in many, many ways. Okay, it'll affect black vote, it'll affect white vote, may even affect Hispanic vote. And part of that question is, as I said, almost authentic earlier in the show. You watch it more and more and you listen to the stories more and more, and you're going to be seeing those things in ads. You didn't just see it last night. I bet you're going to be seeing snippets of those folks who are speaking and talking about what Trump has done. I think you will be seeing that in ads. You will be seeing, in a sense, many black people making ads for President Donald Trump.
You know, the thing I want to say is, and we kind of touch on this, you were touching on it a little bit there as far as the outreach of both the black vote and the women vote. And again, the impact this is going to have not merely on the election of Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, but it filters down into all of these races at the congressional level, as well as just in the Illinois House and Senate races, and then all those other legislative races across America. The Republicans pointed out that under President Obama, the Democratic Party lost something like over 1,100 legislative races, and that led to the Republicans taking over some of the state houses that they had not previously controlled. So I want the viewers to keep this in mind. This is not mere theatrics. The presentation of the parties and how they are viewed is extremely important. And the fact that a lot of people looked at Donald Trump 2 years ago in such a negative light, the viewers, is what cost the Republicans, at least here in Illinois, 2 of those House seats in the 14th and 6th. And Rodney Davis down in the 13th district here of Central Illinois came within an eyelash of losing his race to a woman. And by the way, that's going to be a rematch this year, so we'll have to pay attention to that as well.
Well, and following up on your point about the impact of the session we're having about the presidential race on the congressional races, you know, Jim Oberweis, as you know, is challenging Lauren Underwood in the 14th congressional district. And he talks about going out to Corey Brooks, who's a minister on the south side and runs a church out there, south side of Chicago. And they had a day where they were trying to help people who are having a tough time in these COVID times, and donations of food and things being distributed. Well, people would know Oberweis made a lot of money initially in the wealth management business, Oberweis Asset Management, but also in the Oberweis Dairy. So Jim Oberweis drove a dairy truck out to that event on the south side and distributed himself milk with his good friend, somebody he knows quite well. So this was not a phony photo op, Corey Brooks. Okay, and people can see that discussed in our show, youtube.com/Illinois Channel TV. Jim Oberweis running in the 14th. And then, as you know, Jeannie Ives running in the 6th Congressional District also is a close friend of Corey Brooks, also has a long-standing relationship. The point is, Brooks is a guy who's well known in the community, is trusted, brings a lot of credibility. And you don't establish those relationships where people are going to come out for you or let you appear with them if you just go over to them. You just met them prior to your congressional race.
Let me jump in. I want to get before we run out.
I just want to say, the point is your point in spades, okay, so to speak, in the 14th Congressional District and the 6th Congressional District, the very issue we're talking about, extremely important as to whether the Republicans can win back those 2 House seats.
The other thing is, on the national level, again, the Democrats were criticized, as we mentioned earlier, at their convention for not bringing up the riots and all that. And in the clip we earlier showed of the vice president, he brought up that they hadn't addressed it. So, Jeff, the thing is, what I don't know, we don't want to say the whole fall election is going to be based around the showmanship of these 2 conventions. It won't be. We're going to have, or we presume we're going to have debates. But as we tape this yesterday, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said she didn't think there should be some debates. Now, the former Vice President Joe Biden came out and said, no, I'm going to debate. So apparently we're going to have some debates. Hopefully that does happen. A lot of people think that will be very strong for Trump, that he's a better person in those debates. And we saw what he did with Hillary Clinton. We saw what he did with the 17 other or so Republican candidates, that he came out and was effective. So people tend to think that Trump maybe isn't that strong debating, but the record shows that he actually has held his own. The other thing is, though, as we see the backdrop of this violence happening in Portland and Minnesota, on Michigan Avenue in Chicago, and last night, as the participants on the White House lawn were leaving, they were accosted by groups of people yelling at them. Senator Rand Paul was saying that he feared for his life as he and his wife were walking to their hotel and had to be surrounded by police officers at the last moment. I think the American people are looking at this, and the whole question of lawlessness, whether it's brought up as a campaign theme by either party, I think it's actually going to be one of the key issues that is going to be on the mind of the American public.
Realtors are bringing this up. If you read the Chicago Tribune in Chicago about the number of people who live in the city in the more affluent areas of Streeterville and the Gold Coast area and River North, okay, some of the more affluent areas very close to the Loop, they're saying they're moving now. They're thinking of moving to the suburbs and maybe even out of Illinois. In short, what they're saying is, watching what happened on the looting in the last month or two in those areas, especially in the Magnificent Mile and those surrounding shops, they no longer feel safe. They've got this great place. They don't, in the Loop, they would like to enjoy it. They'd like to go outside. They no longer feel they could. And so when the Democrats accuse Trump of stoking this, excuse me, he doesn't have to do any stoking. CNN was covering that stuff nonstop in early June, showing the looting in New York and Chicago, around the country. So, the Democrats want to blame somebody, blame CNN for showing the looting, okay? Blame MSNBC for showing the looting. But the other point to make here is safety is very important, law and order and all that, but we don't want to forget the phrase, it's the economy, stupid. I would add here, it's COVID, stupid. The two major issues we really didn't hear as much about in the conventions, both conventions, as I thought they would, and I think we ought to give some time to that.
Right.
What impact does the economy have, and does COVID have, And are they so interrelated? They're basically the same issue.
Well, the Democrats are trying to make the case that Trump has bungled the pandemic and the response, and that he has bungled the economy. They may be able to make the point on the pandemic. That's subjective, but I think on the economy, the American people, I think the voters are going to say, look, we had a fantastic economy prior to pandemic, and they can't blame Trump for the shutdown. I mean, if anything, you might want to say he did a good job with the shutdown, because what else was he going to do? But the amazing thing is, we ought to say too, look where the Congress and the President came together with the financial aid, and we may have another financial aid package coming up. But as we sit here, the markets are up again, and to me it's stunning, as one who follows the market, that we have all-time highs in the NASDAQ and in the Dow. The markets not only have been doing well, but many people would say, tell you that they're always looking forward, and if there is any indication from those markets, it seems to be signaling that the president would be reelected. I think a lot of people on Wall Street would not take a Biden presidency very well.
Well, look for the administration, the Trump administration, to play this card, the shutdown card. So who caused this? Well, of course, the government engineered this. But remember when Trump was saying what he was going to do, and people said, it's the governors that control things, Democratic and state governors. The Democrat states have Democratic-led states with Democratic governors were way more shut down than the Republican states. The shutdown is what caused the loss of 25 to 30 million jobs. The opening up of the economy has what caused the 9 million jobs in the last 2 months to come back. So we're going to hear that debate about, should we keep the economy shut down or should we be opening it up better? Is there a safe way to do it? The Wall Street Journal weighed in the last few days and said the shutdown was way too blunt. There would have been much better ways to handle the COVID issue than to shut down the way they did. Okay, and the same thing on COVID. You know, half of the deaths, I think, across the country have occurred, the COVID deaths, 180,000, occurred in nursing homes. We're now hearing investigations from the Department of Justice going into how nursing homes are handled in New York and New Jersey and so forth. And those are Democratic areas. So this is going to be going on. Some will say it's the blame game. We're going to about who really caused the mess up in the economy, who will, and more importantly, who will bring it back better and safely, and the most important thing, who will cause the schools to be reopened and safely. Well, there are a lot of people across the country who are not thrilled to see what many say are the teachers' unions using their power to shut down the schools needlessly. Okay?
The whole COVID impact on our society is a new experience for all of us, relative to the schools, relative to the economy, relative to the wearing of masks. And I don't know. I mean, this is just such a new experience for everyone that trying to say how this is all going to play out is somewhat difficult. I mean, the Democrats are going to try to make hay out of it, obviously, but the other thing is this violence going on in the cities is really another impact. And it's where the parties are going to have to respond to what's happening as compared to necessarily being able to project perhaps a message.
All right. So I think we're just about the end of the show.
We are. Why don't we close out with what happened at the White House last night? A little patriotic music, Jeff. And
let's give them a show. Let's do this kind of stagecrafting that the Republicans showed. Michael Deaver would be proud of the Republicans and of us. Balanced, Terry Martin.
All right, everybody, join in for God Bless America!